Shabbat Shalom, my friends. This is Shabbat HaGadol, the great Sabbath, the Sabbath that immediately precedes Passover. And as we all know, Passover with First Seder begins this Saturday evening. We read a special Haftarah on Shabbat morning from Malachi chapter 3, verse 4 and following. And the name Shabbat HaGadol is probably derived from a line in that Haftarah that reads, "Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great Gadol, the great and terrible day of the eternal, to turn the hearts of parents to their children and the hearts of children to their parents." Close quote. It's all a bit unclear because the word great in our Haftarah seems here almost to be synonymous with terrible. Gadol doesn't usually mean terrible, but here, a terrible day, Gadol day is coming, and if we're going to survive, then we will need Elijah to come to do what perhaps only a heavenly emissary can do, to turn the hearts of parents to their children and the hearts of children to their parents. If there is love and mutual concern and mutual respect within the core family unit, then maybe we can withstand the coming great and terrible day. So now a fair question. Why was Elijah selected for such a mission? Here's my guess. It's a guess. If Elijah is enough to herald the arrival of the Messiah, he's responsible, then maybe he is the right spirit force to create households of harmony. I suppose we all can ask Elijah about this personally when he visits our Sedarim on Saturday evening. Now, our Sedra is Tzav, Leviticus 6:1 and following, and it begins with a highly detailed and reasonably boring description of some of the basic sacrificial offerings. The burnt offering, the meal offering, the sin offering, and the very popular shlamim offering, an offering of well-being that often ended with a shared picnic of a sacred roasted meal. Not bad. The second part of the Sedra focuses on the dedication of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and on the consecration of Aaron and his sons as priests. Yeshayahu Leibowitz wants us to pay close attention to the fact that we are witnessing here the establishment of a hereditary priesthood. Aaron was brought forward to be consecrated as a priest together with his sons. There is nothing like this elsewhere in the Torah. Yes, at a later date, kings will attempt to establish dynasties, and much later on, some of the great rabbis sought to have their sons succeed them. But all of that was for the very human desire to preserve and consolidate personal power. Outside of the priesthood, inherited power was not Torah. It was strictly a human activity. The greatest possession of the Jewish people is the Torah, and Torah most explicitly must be embraced anew by each generation. We don't inherit Torah. I don't get to inherit my mother's Torah. I have to get my Torah on my own. That's why the Midrash taught that when the Israelites stood at Sinai and said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will act according to the Torah and we will study it, that the soul of every Jew who would ever live was there as well. Each soul, each generation claiming for themselves Torah, embracing Torah for themselves. Moses' sons did not inherit his role. The prophet Samuel's sons did not succeed him. We must acquire the moral and ethical high ground of the world by ourselves, not inherited. Now, hold on to that thought for a moment. Do you want to try something different? Let's step outside of the normal weekly assignments and look at the Haftarah that is not being read this Saturday. Remember, our reading from Malachi is not the regular assigned Torah, a Haftarah that's supposed to go along with our Sedra. Malachi is dropped in and pushes aside the traditional reading from Jeremiah so as to connect the Haftarah that we read with Passover. The Jeremiah passage is the usual Haftarah for Tzav, but not this year. So I'm curious. What's going on in the Jeremiah passage? There is a strange disconnect there between Jeremiah's words and that part of our Sedra devoted to the minutiae of sacrifice. Jeremiah quotes God as saying, "When I freed your ancestors from the land of Egypt, I did not speak with them or command them concerning burnt offerings or sacrifices. But this is the command that I gave them. Listen to me, and I will be your God. You shall be my people. Walk only in the way that I have commanded you, and it shall go well with you." Close quote. Jeremiah then goes on a tear, bitterly rebuking the people for a wide variety of sins against God's will. The people were committing child sacrifice. They stole and they murdered. They rejected Musar, ethical instruction. They paraded their achievements and their wisdom as an expression of arrogance and pride. Jeremiah ends this passage by explicitly stating what God really wants from us. Set aside arrogance, practice kindness, justice, and righteousness. Did you get the disconnect? The Sedra is mainly about a detailed exposition as to how sacrifices are to be offered, while Jeremiah, in the original Haftarah, is telling the people that sacrifice is not at all central to what God wants from us. It's not clear when and how the Haftarot were attached to specific Torah readings. Maybe 2nd century BCE, maybe at a time when the Romans banned the reading of the Torah in public. We don't know. But what matters here is that every Haftarah selected from prophets always contained a theme connected with the Sedra, but Jeremiah's words seem to conflict with the Sedra's central concern. Trust me, for more than 20 centuries now, scholars have tried to figure out what's going on here. So let me embrace my own arrogance and try briefly to offer an explanation. Jeremiah was of the tribe of Levi. His father was a Kohen. He himself was a Kohen, hereditary. He witnessed the sacrifices. He saw that the sacrificial system was rife with corruption, and he saw that moral corruption was an infestation that touched all of Israelite society. How could God accept or even desire any sacrifices so long as the people were morally corrupt? What use were priestly offerings when those offerings were tainted by the very people who offered them? Obedience to God, Jeremiah, must first and foremost be expressed through our personal behavior, by our relationships, by our commitment to our covenant with God. Now remember, it all weaves together. Remember how we began today. Great values, sublime values, worthy behavior are not inherited. Each generation, each person must embrace the loftiest teachings on their own for themselves. No amount of ritualized behavior, including sacrifices, no matter how perfectly performed, can replace living a worthy life. Jeremiah. So, have a wonderful Pesach, conducting your Sedarim according to all of the rules. But remember, in the eyes of our tradition, what we do with the powerful ethical teachings of the Haggadah, the days and months after Pesach, will always be more important than whether we dipped once or twice. Shabbat Shalom, Chag Pesach Samayach.